Welcome, everyone. My name is Dennis Harabin. I'm the Executive Director of Project Scholarship. What Project Scholarship is, we're a project within a 501c organization who's really trying to affect the way students pay for school. The amount of money that's out there for school has been relatively fixed over time. It comes from the government. There's certain people who offer scholarships. And what Project Scholarship is doing is trying to inject what we'll call new money into the system. And the way we do this is by letting companies who would never give scholarships before offer up projects to students in order to get a quick project done and offer a micro scholarship. So the students are able to bank these micro scholarships, and twice a year there's a withdrawal period where they can withdraw them. So we'll cover that a little bit more down the road, and your local meetup sponsors will be able to talk about that. So that's a little bit of background on Project Scholarship. And we're excited here today because we have a very timely matter with college award letters. I know a lot of parents out there are starting to get the college award letters. We're in the season. They're finding out about financial aid. CNBC, who only covers really timely things, just did an article yesterday about it. And we are blessed to have Mark Salisbury, the co-founder of Tuition Fit, who's going to be here today to kind of walk us through and explain a little bit more about that. So Mark, first, thank you for joining us here today.
You bet. It's great to be here, Dennis.
Excellent, excellent. So let me just give a little bit of your background, and then I'll let you elaborate on it. Our expert, Mark, has spent his whole career in higher ed as an administrator, a researcher, and a teacher at Augustina College and the University of Iowa, as well as an admissions recruiter and soccer coach at Idaho State University, Central Michigan, Missouri University of Science and Technology. I should be calling you, Dr. Mark. He is a PhD in higher ed from the University of Iowa. And in addition, he has degrees from Kansas and the University of Minnesota.
That's right.
So, excellent. Well, we won't get into some of the problems that Iowa's basketball team is having at this point internally, because my Villanova Wildcats aren't doing so well either. So as far as shifting things over, Mark, can you elaborate a little bit on what brought you into the higher ed field and why you've stayed in it as long as you have?
Sure. When I stepped onto a college campus the very first time, it just was, this is where I want to be. There's just such an energy on a college campus. And it's not just about, professors doing research and coming up with new ideas, but there's an energy with a whole slew of people every year, a new cohort of students coming in with ideas and dreams and insecurities and worries about what's going to happen. And you have a chance to be a part of something amazing that affects the next generation of people. And I just really caught the bug, even as a student. And so when I got the chance to start working on a college campus, you didn't have to wait very long for me to jump at that. And I've been lucky enough to have a lot of different jobs on college campuses. So I've been able to see how the whole enterprise works and see how it affects students in different ways, and see how the numbers work and see how the finances work or don't work, because I've had a chance to sort of get way in down underneath everything and sort of way in the belly of the beast and see all the numbers and see all the things, how they work, and increasingly how they don't work.
Excellent, excellent. So as far as going through the expertise and getting into what it is we're doing with the Tuition Fit here. Before we get too deep into that, and I have to say I'm a very big fan of Tuition Fit and when I found it and sought you out. But first, I'd love to how the term financial aid gets thrown around a lot, yet I really doubt people understand the complexity of it and that it's not all one bucket of money. That
Right.
Financial aid is made up of a lot of different things, and some schools get a little fancy or a little trickery, if you want to call it, how they deliver some of it.
Those are nice words, Dennis. Those
Yes.
are very nice words.
So could you just give us a financial aid 101
Yeah.
for some of our viewers who aren't familiar at all with the financial aid and are hearing about it for the first time?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that happens is this is a term that has a history that over especially the past 30, 40 years has shifted a lot, but the term never changed. So when you and I were in school, I'm sure with a lot of the people who are out there listening, when we thought of financial aid, the idea was it's money that's given to aid somebody, to help them out because they can't come up with the funds themselves to pay for college. So it was all about people who had been accepted to the college. The college said, you know what, we think you could be successful here, but we recognize you can't afford it, so we're going to help you out. We're going to give you some aid. And most of that money, especially way back when, most of that money started out just coming from the institution itself and wealthy donors and whatever else who just said, hey, these are people that we think should be a part of this community of alums, so we're going to help them out. Then the federal government got into the mix and created something called the Pell Grant that was federal government aid, but it was all about students who had need. Students had financial need. And if you had the money to pay for school, you were going to pay for it. That started to shift several decades ago when a couple of pieces came into the mix. Colleges started to think about financial aid as a recruiting tool, not just a way to help students who've already come. And so they started to give money for what they called merit. So if you had a high test score, or if you demonstrated some other really unique trait, even related to athletics or some other things, we're going to give you some financial aid. It's not really aid anymore to sort of help out in a difficult situation. It's now just, we're going to find ways to sort of sweeten the pot and get you some money to come to our college and sort of lure you in. So you've got now this whole pot of money that's really about merit, not so much about financial need. And the merit pot's gotten way bigger than the need pot over the last several decades. Add to that loans, right? Loans are things that it's not free money. You got to pay it back, and oftentimes with interest, right?
Right.
That started to get organized and sort of stuck into the same pot, so that financial aid now also includes money that we're just going to sort of float you in the short term, but you're going to pay it back in the long term. And that included loans from the federal government, and then it started to include loans from the private sector, some of it sort of government subsidized, some of it not, even to the point where there was a stretch where students were paying for college with their credit cards and then trying to figure out why they owed so much money later when they hadn't read the fine print on the credit card and it was 19% interest, right? So financial aid now includes this whole series of different kinds of aids, and we haven't even talked about private scholarships with organizations outside of higher ed that say we'll give some money from, the community foundation has a scholarship from some wealthy family that set up a foundation. You apply to that, and then you apply that money to the school, or work study. We haven't talked about that yet either. But the point is that these are all different ways to add to that larger amount of money that a college is going to say we'll give you somehow. That's financial aid to lure you to come to our school.
And now all of that is in that same letter that you're getting when they're telling you kind of that award, what the award is, correct?
Yes. All of that information gets thrown into a single letter. It's almost always just one page. That is, when you get accepted to a college, then you also get your financial award letter, your financial aid letter. And that will have all of this information in it. And I think the term you used, what was the term you used earlier? Fancy?
A little trickery.
A little trickery. These letters are famous for being hard to make sense of and sometimes just downright misleading. They're to figure out, what's my actual bill going to be come next fall? What am I going to get asked to write a check for or pay somehow? These letters are notorious for being difficult to make sense of.
Understood. And now as far as the universities, and how do they determine that aid? I know when we talk a little bit about the CNBC just had an article yesterday, as I mentioned in the intro, where they have a very long infographic that, as far as how people can understand these aid letters. I got a headache just reading that whole article, trying to decipher and look at that infographic.
Right. Let's go back to the aid letter. The infographic was worse.
I know. Yeah, right here. I actually have it on the screen. I mean, this is the how to compare a college aid letters, and that infographic is like 17 steps, and that's just the do-it-yourself article phase to kind of get into that. So
right. For everyone, there's a little caveat.
So I would like to know, do the schools actually, you've been behind the scenes, how do the schools actually determine the aid that they're going to give a student?
So there's the mythology and there's the reality of this. And I think it's important to sort of just put those two things out there. Colleges will say that they really individualize your aid package. They take into account everything that you submit in your application, high school transcripts, but also all your extracurriculars and your essays and any other kinds of promise that you might demonstrate somehow. Maybe your parents went to school at the school you've applied to, all these different things to sort of customize your aid package. And it's not entirely untrue, but that customization might make the difference of a couple $100 here and there. But really, what it comes down to is colleges basically set up a big grid, and on one axis they have financial need, the family's financial situation, and on the other axis they have merit, and merit being, mostly about academic merit. And what you can do at the end of the day is essentially just put the estimated family contribution, which is the number that most people call the EFC, the result of the FAFSA calculation when people fill out the FAFSA. Just
to speak of that, that's not what you and I would expect. That's kind of those numbers are not always they're earth-shattering when people first see them, correct?
Yes. Somebody said that usually it comes out to saying that you're expected to pay about 47% of your income a year to pay for college, which of course
is not realistic to anyone, I or anyone else.
No, not at all. And there are some schools that use something called the CSS profile, which is a friend of mine described it to me yesterday as a sort of like proctological exam of your finances, where they really do ask you an insane amount of questions to try to get more specifically at it. But at the end of the day, their estimation isn't necessarily all that accurate either. Right. But nonetheless, this is what institutions use. And so these are the proxies that we're stuck with. So it's the federal government's decision about what they expect you to contribute as a family. The EFC, they put that on one axis, and then you take the SAT score or ACT score and put that on the other axis to reflect merit. If you have those two numbers, you can essentially plot anybody on that giant matrix, and that's going to estimate what your aid package is going to look like.
So now, do schools publish this so we can see this ahead of time, or?
Oh no! Of course not. Of course not. No, that is their secret sauce, and they think. I mean, this is one of the funniest things about colleges and universities is that they each think that their secret sauce is secret and really, really good sauce. It's probably just coming out of a ragu bottle at the store. But the point is, it's their secret sauce that they think is their way of organizing their financial aid to try to get the kind of students that they want to get. And so you don't know what you don't know as a consumer, right? You don't know where you would plot on any of those particular schools' matrices when you apply. But at the end of the day, that's how they all do it. They just have a slightly different matrix at each school.
Now, when you were in enrollment, did you hear many complaints about that? I mean, it sounds like the cards are stacked against me. If I'm going to apply, it's like, basically, here's my wallet, take it. And I'm going to live with what you got to deal out. I mean, living in that from the other side of the table, people probably weren't too happy with you, right?
Oh, no. And we wouldn't just ask for the wallet. I mean, oftentimes it would be a watch and a ring and a necklace. But we would try, seriously, this is a really frustrating thing for families, right? Because it turns out that you want to have a sense of the cost of a place from the very beginning of your search process before you decide which schools you're going to apply to.
Of course, I don't walk into a Lamborghini dealership because I know I can't afford a Lamborghini.
Right.
But I have no idea. But if they say, hey, the guy next to you just got that Lamborghini for $100, you have to pay full price. But then I walk into a Lamborghini dealership, but it's a crapshoot, right? Walking in, you really don't know what you're going to be paying.
And it used to be a little bit more manageable. So it used to be that, this is 30, 40 years ago, that the sticker price that a college puts right out there in front, you can find it online, is their tuition and fees and room and board. Their sticker price would be one thing, and then a certain proportion of students would get a discount. And the average discount wasn't that much less than the sticker price. So you could sort of say, okay, so if the cost of this college is $10,000 and the average price that students pay is $9,000, I sort of know that the price I'm going to be asked to pay is somewhere between $8,000 and $10,000, right? So it's a fairly tight window. But now, first of all, the sticker prices jumped through the moon. So now the sticker price is 40 grand, let's just say in this hypothetical scenario.
Sure.
But the average net price is 20 grand. And what that means is that for each individual, your price could actually be somewhere between 0 and 40,000. So from a planning standpoint, this has now become really, really difficult to manage and really drives families crazy. And so what families want to know is, what's my price going to be? Because I'm not going to apply to a college that I won't be able to afford anyway, especially when I got to pay $50 to send in an application, right? That's like a shell game run out on the corner, right? That's nuts. But that's the system as it's now set up, and families hate that. So this really does create a situation for everybody in higher ed that's really maddening. And it's all a function of the combination of that matrix that each school uses that they don't tell anybody, followed by the process by which you find out your real price is such that you have to make a whole bunch of decisions about schools before you know what your actual price is going to be.
That's nuts. And I have to tell you, obviously I knew a lot about this. I just wanted you to review some of this for people coming in. And that is why when I saw what you were doing at Tuition Fit, I immediately thought it was brilliant. Because again, I have 3 stepsons that are getting into college age. I have a 6-year-old daughter and it just scares the heck out of me as to what we're going to have to do here when it's time to, and it was just brilliant what I saw, what you were doing with Tuition Fit. So I sought you out when I found out what you were doing and saw that and connected with you. And then so we can share some of what you're doing here with other people, because I just thought it was brilliant what you're doing. So I'm going to let you, as far as going in, can you explain a little bit of how, with all your experience, with all your background, with knowing this, how you came up with the idea of Tuition Fit and how it solves some of these problems that we described here today?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you and I were just talking about this, and I'm sure everybody else was sort of thinking about it too, is that, this matrix that we talked about, this secret sauce that colleges have, that's basically where all the actual prices are. And if we could actually get that information, suddenly we would all be able to shop with full knowledge of which prices are which and which schools could I actually afford and all of that stuff. And so how do we get those actual prices? And since I've been doing this stuff for a long time and thinking about that question, it's one of those moments where an idea just pops in your head and you realize, you know what, those actual prices are all out there. They're not hidden in a vault somewhere. They're already distributed out there in the public. It's just that the actual data points are all scattered across 1 million different award letters sent out to millions of kids. And every family sort of has it in their mind that you don't share that information. And so each family ends up hobbled by that problem where each family only has a couple of prices from which to pick from. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know that they could go and talk to another school. They don't know that the kid down the street has gotten an offer from that same school for $5,000 less, and the two kids are very similar. You don't know what you don't know. So the idea was, hey, what if we could figure out a way to centralize all that information, get everybody to share it? Then we got a way for people to all see all these prices and use that information. So that was really the backstory to this. And so then you start thinking about, okay, how do you protect anonymity? How do you make sure that people share what they can share, but don't have anything else that, makes it so that everybody knows something about you that you don't want them to know. So we can just get the pricing information and organize that by EFC and by test score, so that I can go and see what other prices are out there that have been offered to somebody just like me. And so we just started trying to figure out how to build that and use the technology to do it. And lo and behold, there's this thing called the internet. I don't know if you've heard about it. It's really cool.
Yeah, yes, it is.
It's going to take over. I tell you, it is going to catch on at some point. But there's a way to build something like this and do it in a way that's free for the public. And we just started working on it. And that set in motion about a 9-month period of building a platform that we could do this. And that's how Tuition Fit was born.
Excellent, sir. Excellent. And I've just handed over the mic, the controls to you. I know you have a deck here where you're going to walk us through Tuition Fit, how it works, and some of the advantages for people to use it.
All right, let's do that. All right, so this is I'm just going to talk through some of this, and then you can throw a question at me anytime you want. There's a lot of stuff in here to sort of talk through, and there are tons of details here that we'll have to talk about as we go. But essentially, the idea is, let's just give the power back to the people who are paying for college, right? Like, one of the things that's driving the student debt to where it is people end up having done most of the work of narrowing down their list of colleges without knowing price. Then they get 3 or 4 offer letters from colleges they've applied to, and it turns out they can't afford any of them. But they want to go to college. They want to make it work. Nobody wants to sort of say, I failed at the whole thing. So they then take the price that is the least awful, borrow more than they should borrow, and now suddenly they're over a barrel. And that's what's driving student debt to where it is now. So the idea is, let's just give the power back to the people and make it an even playing field and let the public drive price. So that's really what was going on behind this thing. And we really are just trying to solve a fairly simple problem. Make college more affordable, decrease debt, make it so that the public has clear information, and hopefully we can motivate colleges to lower costs and embrace real price transparency. And we can talk about a little bit about how we're going to get to that in a second. But yeah, we set these goals pretty high, but why not, right? I mean, it's a crazy problem as it is right now. So
that's exactly what we're with Project Scholarship. People first, when I heard about it, thought we were crazy, but you have to take small chunks, if Mark, if you and I don't, who will? That's the question.
That's where I ended up at the end of the day with this was, and I have talked to a lot of college presidents over the years that I've worked in higher ed, and we've talked about the pricing problem many times. And once you get a college president off of their sort of PR, platform, they will tell you that the pricing model doesn't work and it's not sustainable to have a super high sticker price and a super large discount, because the public sees the sticker prices, they don't know what they don't know, and then they don't apply to the schools. And so now the school doesn't have nearly the applications. So they know that it's not going to work. Somebody, modeled this out 20 years and was showing how, okay, tuition now is $1 million and your financial aid discount is going to be $950,000. How absurd is that, right?
Right.
But that's the path we're on, right?
Right.
So the idea here is really simple. And yet for the colleges, a lot of them have said, I really hope this works because we need it to work too, but we can't fix it from within the higher education milieu for a bunch of different reasons. Because they're all there's a herd mentality here and they're worried about competing with each other. And so you don't take chances. So at the end of the day, like you said, who's going to fix this? Well, let's go for it. And really, what we're trying to do is sort of hit a couple of notches all at once. Share information and yet protect anonymity so people are able to see the key information without then connecting it to individual identities. So let me just sort of talk through a couple of things that I think we all know, but are really, really goofy once you sort of lay it out here. Today, when people are having to choose for a college, there's probably 4,500 give or take colleges. We've been watching the news recently, so maybe there's 4,499 now because another school closed between when I put up the slide and we just started talking about it. But that's a lot of schools to try to pick from and to narrow it down to 10 schools you're going to apply to. And so what people do is they've got this huge task in front of them where they've got to narrow things down. And so they start with this whole pile of schools. They got to narrow it down and narrow it down and narrow it down. And because the price tags are so high and because you don't know what your price is going to be, you're having to pick without knowing what your actual price is going to be. But you eventually figure out, okay, I'll pick a school based on this and this. I pick 10 schools. I'm going to apply to them. So I apply way down here. I don't find out my price until the 23rd hour, right? The very end of the thing. And then I got to decide here. Well, obviously, when tuition was low and aid went to need, this was a tolerable process, right? It wasn't great, but it was tolerable because the price you were going to actually end up to pay wasn't all that different than what you thought it was going to be. And if you didn't have the money to pay for it, you knew you were going to get some help. But now with tuition so high and aid just all over the place, knowing actual price early, right at the front of that process, it matters a lot. You know, why would you, like you said, why would you go to the Lamborghini dealer, take a day off and go check that place out, test drive one or two, knowing you're never going to be able to afford it? That's a waste of time. Might be fun, but it's a waste of time, right?
Exactly.
So the idea here is just, let's see if we can build something that fixes this. And that's where Tuition Fit came from. And it's the tuitionfit.org is the website. You can go there. It really is free. And the reason we did it that way was because we need to have a full comprehensive set of data here. And so if you start charging a lot of money to participate with this thing, then they're only going to have a certain subset of people use it. And so we really needed to make it free so that no matter who you are, no matter where your financial status is, you can still use this platform and benefit from it. And it starts with a pretty simple process. It's just the students set up a secure account. I will say this, that you can probably imagine too. It's a lot of times it's the students' parents, because the students' parents are much more aware of the cost. And 17-year-olds aren't always the most savvy comparison shoppers, right?
Nor do they care.
Nor do they care if mom and dad are paying for it, right?
Exactly.
So you set up a secure, and it's a secure account. You can't log in through Facebook. You can't log in through Google. We set it up so you can only get into the system through your own username and password. And it's a complex password that requires a symbol and an uppercase letter, lowercase letter, and number, the way that you do it if you really want it to be secure. You provide some basic demographic information. We do ask for name and address. We don't ask for phone number. We don't ask for social security number, anything like that. We ask for name and address, and I'll tell you why in a second, but it's actually information that we only use as a verification piece when the student uploads a letter. Then we ask the student for academic information, i.e. their test score and their high school GPA, and their financial need information, which is only asking for that EFC. So you have to have done the FAFSA in order to have an EFC, which you should do anyway, in order to use this platform. Then when a student's received an award letter, they just take a picture of it and upload it to the system. They can scan it on their printer or just take a picture of their phone and upload it to us. The first thing we do is we redact all of the private information in that letter. But that's why we need to know the student's name and address, because it's really important that we see that the letter the person's uploaded is actually a letter that was sent to that student, so that we have a way of verifying this letter went to this student. Then we redact all the private information, so we blot out name, address, social security number, anything that might connect that letter to that person on the letter, and we actually give the student or the family then the final say on the quality of those redactions. So if they wanted to ask us to redact another phrase somewhere in the letter that they just weren't comfortable, that's fine. Redact it, just so that fully trusting that this is being done so that person's private information, person's anonymity is fully protected. Then we take all of those pricing numbers that you and I talked about a second ago, and we make sense of them. And this is where, yes, I've spent 20 years in higher ed. A couple of my teammates on this project have been in higher ed for decades. We know how this data gets played out in a letter, but we also know how it can be very simple, and to organize it in such a way so that you know at the end of the day, here's the price you're going to be asked to pay for next fall, and here's how much you're going to be asked to pay back after you finish college.
So I don't need to go through that whole infographic and figure it all out on my own?
No, thankfully, no. We're not going to make them do that. This is one of the things where this process gets to be really complicated, and then we can sort of make it more complicated if we want to. And for some people, yeah, that's really interesting about, okay, which aid goes where and which loans are going to start charging interest the day you start college and which loans won't start charging interest until you graduate. Great. All that's interesting. And for some of us, that's really worth knowing. But on some bottom line level, when you're trying to decide which school you want to go to, what you want to know is, what are you going to be charged next year? How much of it are you going to have to pay back later? Because sometimes one school is going to charge you a lot of the money that you get off of the sticker price is actually in loans. You have to pay back almost all of it. And some schools, they don't have any loans. So all of that award money is free money. Well, that actually matters a lot if you know the difference and you're comparing two schools. But that's a fairly simple thing if you can just simplify it. So we just pull all that pricing data together and simplify it so that a family can see, what are you going to be asked to pay next fall and how much are you going to have to pay back after you finish. Then when a student has uploaded at least one offer, because that's the way that you make this thing work, is everybody's got to share something in order to benefit from the result of this whole big data set. Students can then compare offers. So because we've had students share their academic information and their EFC, now what a student can see is all of the other offers that students just like them uploaded. So now I can see other prices that I will get if I were to apply at any of these other schools. I'm not going to see prices that have been offered to a student who's very different from me, because I would never have a shot at that price anyway, right? Right. So one example is, let's say I'm a kid with a 24 ACT score and I've got a 10,000 EFC, and I start looking at this. I've shared mine, so I start seeing the other colleges that are on there and the prices that those schools have been offered. And I see Harvard's not on the list of schools. There's no offer from Harvard in here. There's a reason for that. I'm not going to get into Harvard with a 24 ACT score. So Harvard hasn't accepted anybody with a 24 ACT, and therefore I don't even see that school on my list, because I'm just seeing schools that have offered somebody like me a price tag. And now I can start to, I can focus my energy on what are the other prices that are out there that I could conceivably get. Makes sense. Does that make sense so far?
It makes complete sense. So you're building basically a comparison engine.
Yes.
Just like what you're used to seeing when I normally buy stuff on Amazon, when I normally pay for things, when I buy a house.
Right. In so many other industries, we've already done this, and it's benefited the public, and it's actually benefited that whole marketplace, right? The vendors, the sellers who were doing it a different way, they had to adjust, but they turned out just fine as they adjusted. They figured out, for example, in the car industry, they can sell a lot of cars online. They don't even need a salesperson in the store, but they can still sell those cars. Okay, great. They did it. They adjusted. Car industry is doing just fine, except for when they're knuckleheads about what they build. But point being that all of these other industries have benefited from this idea of solving the information asymmetry so that the buyer and the seller knows the same stuff. And then you can let that marketplace work. And you can let it work optimally because now the information is the same. That's all we're trying to do here, is just make it simple. So once I've loaded all that stuff up, I've loaded my letter up, now that you get to have a dashboard and you can see a couple of things that the student can see. One is on the left, I see that I have uploaded 3 award letters, and there are a couple of stages there that are important to know. One is if I've uploaded a letter and it hasn't been processed yet or redacted, it would sit in the pending category. If I've uploaded a letter and I didn't have my flash on my phone, so I couldn't read it, but I sent a picture that we can't make sense of, then it's got a letter that it'll be in the need attention section, so you have to retake that picture or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And then there's an approved one where we have approved the redactions, we've got the numbers off of it, but you as the user still has to go in and say, yes, I'm good with those redactions, I've approved this. That all has to happen before it goes to the live site. Then in the middle category is the sort of one that we're all talking about. I know that there are now 7 other offers that have been offered to students similar to me that I can go look at, okay? And we can talk about that messaging section in a second. But then if I click on see prices, bingo. Now, this is me. I can see that the top 3 offers up there, those are awards that I uploaded. I applied to the University of Oklahoma, Arizona State, their West Campus, which is a little bit different. People don't know about it as much. And then the University of Arizona. And I can see what the sticker prices for those schools are. I can see how much money I've gotten in grants and scholarships, which is meaning free money that I don't have to pay back. This is how much in loans that each of those schools has asked me to take out. And it just happens to be that in my case, these are loans that are called unsubsidized loans from the federal government. That's why they're all the same. Now I can see this is the price that I'm going to be asked to pay next year. And you got 3 different prices with my awards. That next column I think is sort of important to note. We didn't talk about this too much earlier, but what a lot of schools will do is they'll do what's called front-loading award letters. And what that means is you'll get an award that'll have a big, big number in it. It'll make it look like you're not paying anything. But what they didn't tell you is that that number is mostly money that's only going to be available in your freshman year. And every other year, that money doesn't exist. And for a lot of families, they don't see that. They don't see the fine print with that. And then they get shocked when they start seeing the bill for the sophomore year. It's way higher than they can afford. And they're over a barrel, they borrow a bunch, and it's not a good scene. So it's really important for us to just note that so people see, okay, there's a bunch of money in here that's not going to be here next year. Just know that as you're comparing the composition of those awards.
Wow. So it's like cable when you sign up and they give you that teaser rate for a couple months and then they hit you with but you sign the year contract and auto renews.
And when you call the cable office to complain about it, and everybody loves that experience.
Sure.
Some financial aid offices are no different. So
I picked that on purpose.
Yeah, I bet you did. So now down here is where all these other offers are. So these are all other students who are same to me in terms of EFC and in terms of ACT score. And they've applied to different schools than I've applied to. And now I can see the same information, the pricing information that these other schools have offered somebody similar to me. And what that allows me to do is just have more information. It just helps me have a better sense of the choices I'm going to be making. For this particular student, they saw right away that this is a kid who happens to be from Illinois, and they saw right away, wow, the difference in price if I went to Northern Illinois University or Southern Illinois University is huge compared to these 3 out-of-state schools. And that was interesting just to sort of note. It doesn't mean that kid's going to go to those schools, but now it's something to note. What's also interesting for this student was they hadn't applied to any private institutions because they just assumed that private institutions were more expensive than publics, and so they just didn't. Well, what this tells us here is there are 3 private institutions in here that one of them in particular is substantially less than 2 of the 3 that this student got into. And what that student realized was, wait a minute, maybe the private institution thing isn't such a bad idea after all. I should think about that again. And I should look further because that assumption that I had doesn't hold. And that's a great example of an assumption that 30 years ago when you and I went to college, it was pretty clear that a public institution was going to be less expensive than the private institutions.
Right.
And that's just not true anymore.
No, and the people at St. Ambrose are awesome.
Yes.
Very good people there.
Yeah, they're down the street from me. So I know them.
I know them well. They're very good people.
Yeah. But the point being here, it doesn't mean that this student thinks St. Ambrose is automatically a great choice. It just says,
right,
here's something that you didn't know that now we can clear up. Thirdly, if this student was thinking about engineering in particular, look at Embry-Riddle compared to these three other big schools that she got into. So all of that to say, this student now says, wait a minute, I should really take another look at some schools that I hadn't thought about before, because I could go someplace and pay a lot less. Let's say that University of Arizona was the first choice. Wait a minute, I could pay 17.1 as opposed to 28.9 and go to a decent. Wait a minute, I'm gonna make a call here, right? So, and you wouldn't know that without this tool, because in the previous iteration of the way things work, the only prices that this student has to look at are the three that they got into. They don't have any idea about these others.
Exactly. It's brilliant.
Yeah, so it just gives people information. And the crux of the move here is now all of us, let's just share. Information is protected. This person's anonymity is completely covered. You can tell right here. We don't know anything about these other students except for we know what state they're from. That's it. And that doesn't get you close to solving personal identity. So this really does set up a scenario in which the student can start to be more informed and make better choices.
But now a question I have for you. So I actually know, I have a track. It's 56 days to that magic May 1st decision day, the magic decision day. My daughter and I, we have a little jelly bean thing where every day she earns a jelly bean and we reload the jelly bean jar. We reload the jar every May 1st. That's how I know. There's 56 days left until National Decision Day.
Right.
Am I a little late to do anything with this?
Yeah, so that's where this other kind of big detail that colleges don't want you to know this, but they're scared, shaking in their boots about this. And that is that in 2010, all the way through the late 2000s, we kept graduating more and more kids from high school every year. So the colleges were flush. There were lots of kids to go recruit. And in 2010, that peaked and it dropped hard within 2 or 3 years. And then it's been flat really ever since. We're looking at a slight bump in the next couple of years, and then after 2024, it drops off the table. And so by right now, like at the peak, say we were graduating about 3.5 million kids a year. By the time we get to 2034, we're going to be graduating about 2.5 million kids a year. And within that, the proportion of those kids that are more affluent gets smaller, and the proportion of those kids that are less affluent gets bigger. So if you're a college and university and you have a sort of mentality that in order to increase salaries and everything else, we have to grow and we have to get more people to pay more each year, and you're looking at that kind of a cliff, you are shaking in your boots, because your whole model for how to generate revenue is not going to work. And the public doesn't really know all of that in the way that I think they should. There's a couple of other factors that have played into this, but the reality is that even now, there are more seats at colleges than there are students to fill them. So last year, over half of all colleges and universities failed to make their enrollment goals. And that's with recruiting long past May 1st. May 1st, except for the most elite colleges, May 1st doesn't matter at all anymore. All of these other schools are now, and it's good 3/4 of the colleges are still bringing students in, offering aid into middle of May, end of May, middle of June, end of June, into July. They're recruiting all the way through the summer just to try to get the number of students that they need to make budget. And even with all of that, half of the colleges and universities last year never made their class, never.
Wow.
So what that means for the public is if we had the information, can shop. And we don't have to wait that 56, we don't have to make that 56 days a thing that we actually have to worry about. Like if we don't commit by May 1st, they're going to give the spot to somebody else. There isn't somebody else. So the colleges are now in a position where they have more information than we do, but as a public, the demographics are the demographics. We can't change it. That's just the way it is. So this gives the public all kinds of time to continue to shop, to continue to look, and make a decision on your timeline about what you think is the right value and the right price for you and your family. And that's a huge shift from those jelly beans. So I think you need a bigger jar.
There you go.
I think you need a lot more jelly beans because things have changed. Things have changed entirely. The elite schools, the Harvards, the Stanfords, yes, they're still getting tens of thousands of applications every year, mostly because more students are applying to more schools. Not so much that there are more students out there graduating, but they still tout these tremendously low acceptance rates and these very, very high numbers of applicants. But that basically fog shields the reality that for every other institution out there, they're scrambling for students. And this puts the public in a position where you can take advantage of it if you had knowledge.
And now how do I know that these numbers are solid?
Well, you can go a couple of places. One, if you go to the, and I'm guessing you meant the demographic numbers?
No. I mean the awards numbers.
Got it. Okay.
That the award letters are real and that they're not just somebody just putting it in there.
Right. No, that's actually a pretty important point. The one thing that we found, and we thought about this a lot because we want this data to be accurate, is that transparency turns out to solve a lot of these problems. One of the things is that every award letter that gets uploaded into the system, as a user, I can click on the name of each school and I can then see that redacted award letter. So if this was you could go in here and see the award letter from St. Ambrose. You could see the award letter from Embry-Riddle. And so you could do the math yourself to see if we got the math right. Sure. And if we got it wrong, you could be the first one to call us up and say, you idiots, you forgot to carry the 4, right? So you have a chance to sort of vet this yourself. The second thing is that when we look at these letters, one, we know the school's logo, we know the way that they organize their award letters. And oftentimes the schools will have somewhere on their website, they'll have what their award letters look like. So Sure. We can vet that right away and look and see, all right, this kid used a logo that isn't the logo from that school, or we clearly know that that's not how these award letters look from that school. So we can immediately throw that out. The other thing we can do is if when the student has put in their EFC and their test score, we can tell right away if a student has indicated that they've got a $30,000 EFC, but they're also in their award letter claiming that they got Pell Grant money. Right. We know those two things don't match up.
I was going to say, what is the combined years in higher ed on your team?
Oh, gosh.
I'd imagine it's pretty high.
We stopped counting at 50. So
you guys are no strangers to this stuff.
No, we've seen every day. I mean, we've seen every dance. And there's enough stuff out there now that this is not exactly evening reading, but there was a huge study that was done last year of award letters from about 9,000 award letters pulled together that really ripped higher education institutions for everything from just being totally uninterpretable to being clearly misleading. One of the things, for example, the institutions will include work study in your award. So work study is something you qualify for based on your financial need, and it just means that you can have a job on that campus and that money has come from the federal government, that you get them this job, you get paid that money, and you can use that money in theory, for tuition. But not every institution has enough work-study jobs to go around.
Sure.
And you as a student, you might have already set up a class schedule in which the only work-study that's available you couldn't do anyway. So that work-study money in your award is no guarantee at all. But the institution has plugged that that $5,000 into your award letter to make your award letter look better,
right.
Make it look like you're getting more money. So we know how to sort through all of that stuff and pull that out of there and clean this up. So there'll be many times where people will say, wait a minute, the price to pay now that you say isn't the price tag that's on my award letter. And we'll say, you're damn right.
Got it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So do you want to talk about the sort of other side of this platform?
I do.
Fire away, sir.
As far as
where's the free lunch?
Yeah. As far as those messages, and let's talk a little bit more about those messages, and I think, and you mentioned that it's free. So how are you? Who is paying you, and where are you going to be making your money on this?
Right. So it does actually cost some money to build a platform like this and host data and everything else. And so if the platform's free for students, who's paying for it? We don't have ads on here. We're not putting ads up here. We want it to be an information resource to the public. Well, what we've found is that, you and I were talking about this just a second ago. It turns out that this pricing dilemma, this pricing debacle, has become a huge dilemma for colleges too. So Sally Mae did a study last year and found that 40% of students, when they're looking at colleges, they see the price tag and they stop looking. Just stop looking right there, because they see this sticker price at $60,000 and they go, I can't afford that, forget it. Or they're smart enough to know that there's some scholarships, but they say, no business in their right mind regularly discounts 50, 60%. They're not going to give me that, so I'm not even going to bother to look. And because of the demographic shift, now hundreds of colleges every year, they don't get enough applications to turn those into students that enroll, and so they miss their class. And when they miss their class, they got to cut their budgets and they got to cut people, and they now start to circle around the drain of whether that school is going to exist anymore or not.
Average, what's the average life expectancy of a VP of enrollment at schools nowadays?
I don't know. How long have we been talking on this road?
I know. It's one of the biggest hot seats in higher ed, right? I mean.
Oh, absolutely. Now within higher ed, people talk about that. I think they call it Black Monday. I might be wrong with that, but it's that Monday after May 1st, when a college hasn't made its class and the VP of enrollment is kicked out to the curb, sort of like college coaches in sports where they don't win enough games. We're seeing the same thing with enrollment VPs because the pressure is so high to make your class. And not to
higher ed's a very nice environment where people do want to work together. The people here at these colleges and institutions really do want to educate these kids. I mean, it's just the finances of this beast and what it's turned into. It's not that they're really looking for this. And I imagine a tool like yours is being well received by these organizations.
Yeah, it's interesting. The college side of this really changes the way that colleges look at this tool. Because obviously the first layer of this is we're going to make you share your secret sauce, right? And the colleges have always thought the secret sauce was the thing that makes them go, so that you're going to share it. Oh no, this is a terrible thing. But the reality for the colleges is such that if there's a way that they could participate in this tool and circumvent the application choke point, and that's what we were talking about a second ago, is if you don't get enough applications, you don't get enough enrollments. And if you don't get enough enrollments, you got to turn the lights off eventually. What if you could find a way to circumvent that enrollment choke point so that you could still get the students who hadn't applied to your school yet, to indicate to them that the price you actually offer is really competitive? There are a lot of colleges that they're not the elite schools. They're schools that are really strong, they're regionally known, they do a lot of really good work. We were talking about St. Ambrose a second ago. And their price is actually really competitive. But because people don't apply to St. Ambrose, they never find that out. And because they never find that out, St. Ambrose can't tell them. So if you could build a system where colleges could subscribe to the same platform and then introduce themselves to students with their actual price, you might really have a tool that people like. And that's what we built with the college side of this platform. So it pays for itself with colleges buying a subscription to the tool. The colleges pay for the existence of this platform. And one of the things that they can do, and it's not the only thing, but one of the things that they can do is this messaging mechanism that we'll talk about in a second, which is essentially when a college buys a subscription, then they get to see the same set of data that the students were seeing, but organized in a different way and still anonymous. And so that data, I'll show you in just a second, but essentially these are the things that the colleges get from it. They get a way to invite students who haven't yet applied to inquire. They get a way to see data that all of the other schools that they compete with are on the platform now, so they can sort of see everybody else's secret sauce. And it makes the process a lot more efficient. So if I'm a college and I've subscribed, now this is what I see. I don't see the name of the student. I see the state they're from. I see the sex that the student is, because obviously there are all women's colleges and all men's colleges. I get to see their test score. I see the high school GPA that they entered in. I see the EFC they plugged in. And hold on those next two columns. I'll talk about those in just a second. But I get to see for each student, you can see the color code is when we're talking about a new student. So most of these students have just uploaded one letter, but there's a student down at the bottom that's uploaded two. I can see that the students uploaded a letter from a school. I can see the price tag that they've got. And from that information, let's say I'm St. Ambrose, and I'm looking at these students, and I look down near at the bottom, and I see here's a student that has got a letter from Sarah Lawrence College. Sarah Lawrence is asking her to pay $16,500 essentially. This kid's got a 29 test score and an EFC of 500. I know my secret sauce. I know my matrix at St. Ambrose. I know we would offer this student far less than $16,000. That last column called invite, most of them have boxes in it. The one that we're talking about has sent in it, and I'll talk about that in a second. I have already clicked on the box in that little square, and a message from me has gone to that student saying, I'm Mark Salisbury, I'm at St. Ambrose College, and I saw your test score and your EFC. We would offer you a much lower price than Sarah Lawrence. Would you like to talk?
And getting back to why you're so brilliant and how you came up with this and going through this, we want to, this cost of customer acquisition in anything is a big driver of overall price.
Right.
So I believe it was PepsiCo who, no one was better at their identifying real estate than McDonald's. They were very good at really clearly knowing where to put a McDonald's, and it met the demographics. So right. PepsiCo's when they owned Pizza Hut, if they still do, I don't even remember, but they would put a Pizza Hut. They didn't bother checking. They just got real estate around where Pizza Hut was, or where McDonald's was, because all the hard work has already been done. All the lifting has already been done. So I can save all the money, because just buying these leads and walking them through that process for these schools is expensive as anything, correct?
Well, this is where so much of what colleges do to recruit students has become an incredibly inefficient process. Colleges will buy names at the beginning of the cycle, and those leads that they buy, they're not that expensive right now, but that's because they're crap. Most of them.
Right. Well, getting that lead to an acceptance, that process of moving them all the way through that process.
Right now, for most colleges, the percentage of those names that turns into an application, forget about enrollment, is in the single digits. So it's not that different than just mass email marketing in terms of your return rate, right? And that's what colleges are stuck with. And so again, if the kid didn't apply to you, you never get to tell them of your great price. So now you're out of luck. With Tuition Fit, the school has a subscription. Now they can just essentially troll here and say, okay, here's a student who
exactly. And I know that they've gotten into these schools These criterias are fine. So again, the McDonald's Pizza Hut model.
Right. I don't have to do anything because I know that this kid's already gotten into Sarah Lawrence.
Show me all these people and let me see what I can cherry pick.
Right. So I just send that kid an invitation. Now, what do you think that kid's going to do? 9 times out of 10, 99 times out of 100, that kid's going to say, you know what? Yeah, I'd love to talk. And at that point,
and if they don't, the parents definitely want to talk.
Yes. And that's when the student then reveals their identity, says who they are, and the school and the student and the family start that conversation. And you're so much closer to closing on that because you now know the student has done so much more about figuring out what kind of school they want to go to and what their things they're interested in. You've just got a much higher quality lead. So from the student's perspective and the family's perspective, not just will families then be able to find other prices that are out there, but they could get invitations from colleges that have subscribed to Tuition Fit saying, hey, we can offer you a better price. And that school may or may not be in the list of schools that you see anyway. So you got sort of 2 ways for families to find their ideal financial fit. And you've got a way for colleges to essentially add a whole series of late stage leads that are much higher quality and they're much closer to actually saying, yes, I'll come. So the system is designed to, around the premise that higher education and the public, we need each other. We need each other bad right now.
Sure.
And we can't just say, well, let's organize this in such a way that we want to win, like beat the other one, even though the public's so frustrated with a lot of this stuff that it probably wouldn't be hard to gin up that anger. But the fact of the matter is we got to find a way to solve this because we need each other. And the demographics clearly favor the public.
Yeah, I think it was the Harvard professor that Christensen or whatever with the dilemma as far as that half of the schools will be closed within.
Yeah, in the next, I think it was 20 years, he said it in 2015, within 20 years, half of the colleges and universities in the country will have declared bankruptcy. Right. That was his, I think it's probably a little bit, but maybe it was intended to be a little bit dramatic just to get some press, right?
To get some attention, yep.
But the financial model, the way things are playing out, that's not a crazy claim. I mean, it's just not working for colleges. And there's a bunch of other reasons for that, but this pricing model is a disaster. And the way that it's playing out is a disaster. And the way that colleges are spending millions of dollars to recruit a class of 400 kids is an incredibly inefficient disaster.
Right. Excellent, sir. No, I think you've explained it very well to people.
Good. I hope so. And it really is like, this is a 2-sided marketplace. Let's be an intermediary, bring folks together and allow transparency to rule the day. And then, hey, play in this new sandbox. There's plenty of room for everybody. And if you're a knucklehead and you don't make it, now it's on you.
Right. Right. Excellent.
Yeah. So, what more questions do you have? Anything?
No, I think you've addressed them all right there. I mean, just to reiterate, which you can never reiterate enough, being from Jersey, I always like to say, "What's in it for me?" What's the hook? Where am I getting hooked? The reason it's free is because the schools need this data. The schools want this pieces, and the schools will come handing you kind of like with lending to or something. The schools compete. So this is to help the schools compete for your student, not where the other way around. And that is why it is free.
Right.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, if you can hand the controls back here.
I think I just did.
I believe you just did as well.
Fantastic.
And let's jump on here. So getting into turning the table a little bit, that's what as from a market place perspective, that's kind of what we're trying to do here with Project Scholarship. And what we are doing with Project Scholarship is we're creating a way to inject new funds into the system. Just like yourself, and just trying to say, hey, this is inefficient. We know that there's just not enough money. Like that expected family contribution is insane.
Yep. Yep.
The cost to just get it done is just insane. And what we're really looking to do is the benefactor of this are the higher education schools, but it doesn't matter what school a student goes to. What we're looking to do is to create, we talked about being able to get that form of aid and work study, how it has to line up, how it has to do. What we're doing is we're creating projects, allowing companies that have nothing to do with colleges or universities. They're the companies who are going to actually be hiring you when you graduate. So we're giving students the ability to actually do micro projects, simple projects, projects that'll be, for some of them will take 10, 15 minutes. The length of time is equivalent to the size of the contract, size of the scholarship. So,
Right.
So every scholarship is divvied up into a first, second, and third place winner. And the company, all they need to do is go out and put in the project and basically say, this is what we want done. And we've controlled the type of projects that are available. And when we push these projects out, the companies allow that student now to compete. And the student, anyone can compete, but how we're keeping it from being, keeping it to US-based students who can attend US-based schools, the reward is a scholarship. And the scholarship, the money can only be spent at those 4,500 schools that you pretty much talked about. It's only approved for nonprofit, accredited institutions here in the United States. So, so students just do these micro projects. They build up their awards. After they built up their awards, it also helps them to find jobs and build their resume while they're doing that, while they're in school. So they can do different projects that are associated with their degrees and with their majors. Yeah.
No, and you have been very kind in your compliments about my project. And you're right. When you said you reached out to me, and we didn't know each other before this, and I saw what you were doing, having spent 20 years working in colleges and universities, working with students, and sort of seeing the kinds of things, the way that their lives work, and the things that they need to be able to do that doesn't necessarily set them up to just go and do it in a way that, somebody who's not also has classes and also involved in other things on a campus, could have a 8-hour-a-day job or a 4-hour-a-day job or something like that. When I saw this project, I thought, this is brilliant, because it does exactly the same thing that we're trying to do, helps to find a way for students to bring down the cost of college, but it works for the students. It works for the students' schedule, and it works for them to be able to take these things on as they have the time and the inclination, and it works right for them to do it. Whether it's 2 a.m. and they're just sitting there with their computer in their bed trying to figure out what to do, they can do these kinds of projects.
Well, and it's funny because I'm a problem solver by nature, and this nonprofit that we'd had put together, we were working with pieces educate people, and when we came up with what was happening here and the trouble that we had that we're facing, the math became simple. There just wasn't enough money in the system to do it. Yet I've been in corporate America more than I've been in higher ed, and if I had a nickel for every time someone says, get a college student to do that.
Yep.
Well, how? How are you going to find one? What are you going to do? Or when I've gone to interview, the money and effort spent to recruit interns, to recruit students, to go out there and do that, to not even know if they can do what is needed to be done.
Right. No, this is exactly the way that, and college students now they're savvy with the way that you can access projects online and the sort of, the gig economy nature of things. This matches up with the things that the way that they think about doing things anyway, or the notion of the side hustle. That's a phrase that every college student knows, right?
Exactly.
So this fits so well with, I think, the other tool that I think more people might be familiar with is Fiverr. And I asked you if this is similar to that, and you were like, yep. And then you mentioned another
99 Designs, another one.
Yeah.
And
it just fits with college students' lives perfectly.
And the reality of it is, again, I've used I've used these, but I've never used one with someone in my same time zone, never mind my same country, never mind my same time zone. So
Right.
when you're competing with people who are making $7 an hour, uneducated, going into some of these pieces for some of these projects, there is no competition here. So by cutting that population, not to steal a quote from a very controversial person, but let's make America great. Let's keep America great. and it's all about, that's why the only people who can apply for this are people here in America. The other part, well, anyone could apply, anyone can do it, but you can't spend the money anywhere except here in America.
Right.
And the flip side of it is it'll also allows you to, you don't need to actually be an active college student at this point. You can literally build up a bank and then go to a community college and take a class.
Oh, genius. I hadn't even thought about that. That's genius.
Yeah. And what's really going to happen is a lot of times these helicopter parents will be doing projects and then turn around and give them to their kids, the checks. So from a company's perspective, work is going to get done. It's all the work that's getting outsourced overseas. This is not just about putting kids through school. It's about insourcing. Mm-hmm. Finding ways to do it, and that's why we're excited to get this launched. And again, it's a nonprofit. Our model, every penny that we make goes back to helping educate people. That's our mission. Our mission is to educate. So along with the projects, we're going to be having little Udemy courses on how to do that project. Yeah. So when there's certain types of projects, so no one even has to know. They can take a Udemy course, learn it. So it's not about where you went to school. It's not about your background. It's not about that. It's about, can you do the work?
Yeah.
And if you can't, learn and get better at it.
It's just so good. I mean, one of the things that people have talked about recently, and there's been a lot of, effort to try to solve this, is the fact that a lot of high school kids come out of high school without a lot of financial literacy. And one of the things that Tuition Fit's trying to do, and what you're going to do, is start to just create contexts, experiences, different things that then make the student, by the very nature of it, begin to be more financially literate. And that's going to benefit the students in all kinds of ways beyond just doing the actual project and getting the money that they get, right?
Oh, and it's going to benefit you and I. I mean, it's going to benefit everyone. Right. with the more financial literate the entire population becomes. So I'm excited about it. And again, these are some big these big problems that we're tackling. But as I joked, I mean, if not us, then who? So we're going to go after these.
Right. Well, clearly there hasn't been anybody until you and I decided to do this. So.
Oh no, I'm sure there's been others that have tried. But we will. Everyone does our little step. So I appreciate your time here, Mark. And we're going to look forward to again having you back live. We're pushing out our meetup network. So this is the first meetup that we've done. We've actually kept it to be a private meetup between you and I. So it's gotten a little longer and been more conversational than it normally would be. But we are really going to look forward to having you back about this a little earlier next year at this time, when we're actually talking to parents throughout the country at live meetups where they can engage some more in-depth questions and hear where you've gotten to at that point.
Yeah, no, great.
All right, sir. We'll stay in touch and look forward to hearing about how things go for you past May 1st and into the season and what schools you've been able to help.
You bet. We'll definitely be in touch.
All right. Thank you, sir.
All right. Bye-bye.